Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome back to another video game review, guys. Today's review is Blades of Fire. This was a title that I didn't know about until recently a couple months ago, and it just got released last month. So I wanted to try it out and see what this game was and everything like that. And of course, naturally released a demo, and I played the demo, and I was blown away by the demo itself. So, what is this game? Well, the first thing that this game is, apparently according to the internet, is that it is a Souls-like game. And I would probably argue against that it's a Souls-like. I mean, yes, it's slightly difficult, but not in the same sense that Souls have been known for. It's only Souls-esque in the form of, like, its death process. So in video games, whenever it comes to a Souls-like game, in my personal opinion, it has to be themed around the same ideal that Dark Souls has been recognized for. Whether it's the status attributes, being able to select and customize, having various of different weapons, and of course the process in which where a game over / death, and respawning to a specific point in which where you were last rested at. And basically that's what this is that basically at a rest point that you were last at, and if you died somewhere between, you do respawn at this specific point, and you do have different weapons. However, though, I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's mostly Souls element. It actually has two other elements infused with it. Gameplay-wise, it feels more like God of War in a way. More specifically, 2018's and God of War Ragnarok's version of God of War. That gameplay style has that same feeling in a way. And in a way, being able to attain health and stamina, the way this game has it, is sort of that same way that God of War is known for, where you have to have Cyclops eyes and Phoenix feathers to collect and stuff. And then when you collect a certain number, your overall max will increase. Same thing with this one, is that whenever you get 4 of either stamina crystals or health crystals, your overall HP / stamina will increase along with it as well. Then of course you also have the fact that it has Metroidvania mixed into it, which is a very weird thing because I've never really experienced that many Metroidvania 3D games per se. I'm mostly familiar with them in terms of 2D, but I haven't played that many of them that feature them into a 3D form, which technically they do exist. It's just, again, I hadn't played those. I never played Metroid Prime, so I have no idea about that part. But it has that Metroidvania feel where you do end up backtracking into previous areas in order to unlock certain areas to either progress through the main story or to get extra items and stuff like that to help with your overall upgrade and stuff. However, though, while all that is simply straightforward, I do want to talk about the main meat about this game. The main thing that made me really enjoy this game overall. And that is actually in regards to the weapon system. Most specifically, the forging. I like weapons. Most specifically, medieval swords, samurai swords, you know, stuff of that nature. That's my go-to thing. And so, I love stuff like that. And so, there's a specific show known as Forged in Fire, where there's a competition between 4 people. And, you know, the first 2 competitions of it involves building the knife itself, and then constructing it and demoing it. And then the last part of the competition is where they actually make a replica weapon based on historical parts of history. And you kind of see what they do and stuff like that, where they plan out, they draw it out, and they plan out how they build the weapon and stuff like that. And then, of course, naturally, they forge the weapon. Not knowing what this game was, I was like, huh, so you're playing as like a sort of a blacksmith, building weapons and using those same weapons to defeat your enemies and stuff. This could be good, but I wasn't 100% sure until I played the demo. And when I played the demo, and this was the first thing I immediately was introduced, I immediately was like, this game has my interest now. It was so fascinating because I literally saw Forged in Fire being referenced in this entire forging process, where basically, yes, you construct the weapon, you decide on what materials are needed in order to construct your weapon, and then of course the finalization of being able to forge out the weapon itself. And I have to say, I really love this system. I really love how they made this. And for some people, they may not think about it as much, but for someone who actually admires how weapons are used and how effective they can be used in battle, followed by, most specifically, when it comes to some weapons, I prefer reach, because that means that the farther away I am to the enemy, the less likely I'm going to get hit by some kind of catastrophic damage that they're going to deliver to me. So I always value a long distance range weapon that will help out in battle. A short range weapon can help a little bit better in terms of like being able to dish out more attacks faster, but ultimately you're right next to the opponent, so therefore you're going to receive the full blunt of attacks if you're right next to them, versus if you just dodge or block, obviously. But the construction of these weapons that they make are affected by different attributes based on the damage of the weapon per se, depending on either the blunt, slash, or piercing of the damage. Then you have the guard attribute, whether it's blocking or parrying for that matter. And then you have the stamina, in which where basically, it depends on how heavy the weapon might be, depending on how much stamina you're going to be using, and depending on your stamina bar depends on how fast you are most likely to dodge, or how sluggish you're going to be in battle. Meaning that if you deplete your stamina, you're going to be quite slow and easy to hit. And then of course you have the fact that the weapon has not only a weight, but also the amount of reach that the weapon has, whether it's the blade length, or in some cases, the staff of the weapon of its ultimate reach. So again, this construction of the weapon itself is very fascinating, and I absolutely love it. Then of course you have the forging process, where you take the materials that you're going to be using, dump them in the forge, and then you have this giant iron that you're going to be flattening out to make your blade. Now of course this process is mostly based on the likelihood that you're going to extend the usage of the weapon per se. And what do I mean by that is that basically your weapon does wear down over time. Now, depending on the weapon that you're using and depending on the likelihood that you're going to be having to repair it, depends on the amount of stars that this weapon has. The least amount is 4, basically the way you start off, and then by the end game, depending on how many you find, you will upgrade to where you can actually potentially go up to 7 stars on any weapon, depending, of course. And the amount of stars is dependent on how many repairs you can do on the weapon itself. So if the weapon gets to the reddish area or potentially breaks, you can use that star to repair the weapon fully, and it can be used once again. Of course, it depends on if you have the material needed in order to repair the weapon per se. Next to that though, you also have other integrations towards forge making, where depending on the weapon's status per se. Now, the weapon stats, I'm not referring to the damage or anything like that. I'm referring to its legendary status. It has known, outstanding, epic, legendary, all that stuff. Depending on the rank of that specific weapon, you can turn it into an NPC where she will then transmute it into raw material that you can use for the forge. And then depending on what materials you have access to you immediately and stuff, depends on what material you can then use in your forge and stuff. So ultimately, this crafting system of making weapons help in terms of being able to forge your weapon. Now, of course, if you're a straightforward person and you prefer higher damage, obviously your best method is to continue through the story to where that way you can get better materials to where you can craft better weapons. But sometimes the best weapon isn't so much the damage output. It's a balancing act. It's a scale in which where you determine how your weapon's going to be made. And I love this. This could be a straightforward thing in which where, oh yeah, just grab yourself a handful of iron and some wood or whatever, and boom, you made a weapon. Versus this game where it actually makes you think about the construction of the weapon itself, making you think, Do I want to do more damage, or do I value more stamina in terms of my weapon build? Do I need to have a better durability to where it can last longer? Do I plan to parry at any point in time? How often do I guard? You know, all of this stuff actually builds into this game as to how well it can be done. And in my personal opinion, this is probably the best feature that this game actually has. That being said, however, though, its worst feature is actually getting lost in the world. That is something that I can honestly say I didn't think I was actually going to have a problem with, was the fact that you actually get lost in the game. So, there were two segments in the game in which where I felt a little bit out of place, or just didn't know where I was going. So, basically, a perfect example is that there's this place called the Crimson Fort. And basically, you're having to find this child character. But the problem is that it's in like a multi-layer tower, basically. But the bad thing is that the map doesn't give you a layer that you can go on. Your compass above your character, on the other hand, does give you a small indicator of whether it's going up or down. And that, to me, is the biggest problem. Is knowing where to go and what direction do I need to go to. And unless you fully explored the map, you're not going to know right offhand. So it makes it really hard to figure out, okay, where do I need to go next? Okay, how do I get down then? So then you're roaming around the area trying to find a way to get down. And the thing is that unless you've played the game fully and actually explored the area and stuff like that, you're not going to know right offhand. There could be a hole that you can drop into. There can be a rope that you can climb up on. And in some random cases, there can be a drop-off that you would think to yourself, there ain't no way I can make that jump. And you actually attempt to, not so much jump, but drop off to it. And somehow you make it. Admittedly, that is probably the worst attribute that this game has. We're not even talking about Soul's formula of platforming, which is, in the end of the day, hideously bad. This game literally says, here's a platform. Do you think you can jump on it? You won't know until you try. And then you try only to find out, oh, you can't make it, and you died. And, oh gosh, it's one of those things where I felt like this could have been done a little bit better. Either you needed to have like some kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but like some kind of like gold mist or something like that that guides you to where you need to go, or something that indicated that, hey, here's something that you can grab onto. Unfortunately, it blends into the environment a little bit too well to make it almost impossible to figure out, okay, here's something that you can climb. It's not Assassin's Creed where it's obvious to the eye. It's so well hidden and so blended in that unless you've explored the game, you won't know it firsthand. So it makes it very difficult to explore the area entirely. However, though, once you've unlocked enough shortcuts and once you've explored the area, you can pretty much get around it pretty easily. It's just that first initial exploration of the area where you're going to have the most trouble. And probably depending, you're going to probably be spending a lot of time trying to get around and stuff like that. And I would probably recommend watching a video walkthrough on how to get through certain areas. First and foremost, see if you can actually get through the area without it, and maybe you might actually be okay. Versus if for some reason you feel like you can't get through it and you've been stuck in the same area for like an hour or two, then definitely do that. Because trust me whenever I say this, I've never had a problem actually having materials on hand, and that was because how long I stayed in the area because I kept getting lost. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know there was a hole that I can drop off to. I didn't know there was a rope right there that blended into a white background that I couldn't clearly see. You see, the point is that I didn't know where I was going. In my personal opinion, I feel like this would be like the best action game for 2025. Now that may be a bold statement, but in my personal opinion, it's got a really good combat system, and I love being able to make weapons and stuff, especially planning out the weapon itself. In my personal opinion, That's like the highest point that this game could offer me. Just being able to plan out my weapon, look at the materials that I have, determine what I can make, and then make the weapon the best that I can possibly make and stuff. And then being able to use it in combat. It's so cool because if you end up making a powerful weapon and you end up killing enemies with a single blow, it makes me think of Doug whenever he says the phrase,
"It will kill."
I love it. I love doing that. It's so fun to me. It's so entertaining. I absolutely love it. So in my personal opinion, if I had to rate this game, it would be a 4 out of 5, and I would say a 4 out of 5 because it depends on who you are. If you like a Souls-like game in terms of like difficulty or something like that, this game is difficult, but only in the sense of like at the very beginning where you basically start off with very straightforward material. You don't start off with any advanced materials to help you build the weapons better and stuff like that. You just start off with like the lowest grade material you can get. But as you continue on through the story progression, you'll get better materials and then you'll make better weapons. And then getting used to the combat system. It's not the same like how it is in Souls, or even for that matter any Souls-like game. It's that you basically have 4 different points of damage output. The triangle for the head, X for the body, and then the circle and square for either side. Of course, this also depends on if you're playing Xbox or PC, but you get the ideal concept. Head, body, and limbs. And then depending on the enemy's weakness, depends on how resistant they are versus how easily weak they are. Now, in some cases, you may be able to just bluntly use piercing or just smashing your opponent with a weapon or something like that. But ultimately, depending on the enemy, depends on where the weakness is. And so, you might want to try using different weapons to help you get through the area and stuff. But it's actually a really good combat system, and in my personal opinion, again, it's probably the best next to the forging process. But if you like a game that allows you to plan out how you're going to be building your weapon and using that weapon to fight an enemy and stuff like that, it is so satisfying that to me, it's hard to bring you down any further other than just, hey, you don't like the game? That's perfectly fine. But I feel like to me, it's a 4 out of 5. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. This is BlackCross sign off. Catch you guys later.